Hi, I'm Chris Said, Los Angeles carjacking attorney, and welcome to CBS Law, where we deliver results, not promises. First, I'll go over the most common carjacking charges. Second, I'll go over defenses we successfully employ every day at CBS Law for clients charged with carjacking. Third, I'll go over common sense measures you can take if you ever find yourself being investigated or charged with carjacking. The most common carjacking charge is a violation of Penal Code Section 215. Now, what constitutes a violation of Penal Code Section 215? First, that someone moves another person using force or fear. Second, that they move that person using force or fear with the intention to take their vehicle. Third, that the person who is moved did not move freely or voluntarily. Fourth, that the distance they were moved was substantial, in other words, greater than slight or trivial movement. And then finally, that the person who moved did not consent to having their vehicle being moved, and that the person who's charged with carjacking did not actually or reasonably believe that they had the person's consent to take their vehicle. Now let's talk about the consequences of being convicted of Penal Code Section 215 carjacking. If one were to be convicted of that crime, the judge can sentence them to a low term of 3 years in state prison, a middle term of 5 years in state prison, or a high term of 9 years in state prison. And that crime has been labeled by the legislature as a violent felony offense, known as a strike. What that means is whatever prison term someone convicted of carjacking receives, they will serve 85% of that term. And so if you find yourself being investigated or charged with carjacking, this is a really serious crime, and you better hire a really serious attorney. Let's talk about some common defenses we employ at CBS Law for clients charged or investigated for carjacking. Well, first, we're going to utilize investigators to make a determination of what witnesses, including the alleged victim, actually observed. Second, we're going to investigate whether our client was actually at the scene. In other words, was this a case of mistaken identity? 2 things for that. 1, we're going to have our investigator interview any alibi witnesses to show that our client wasn't at the scene of the crime at the time of the crime. We're also going to explore whether there's any substantive evidence that they weren't at the scene during the crime. In other words, receipts from restaurants, plane tickets, concert tickets, etc. Third, generally there can be a family dynamic in these cases. In other words, bickering spouses, family matters related to parents and children disagreeing over who can take the car, who can't. And oftentimes there will be motives or biases or alternative agendas of an accuser when saying someone carjacked my vehicle. And then to get into really technical defenses, that substantial distance requirement can't just be slight or trivial. It has to be substantial, and it has to be directly related to the taking of that vehicle. And oftentimes there isn't a lot of evidence to show that there was a substantial distance that the person who is the owner or driver of the car actually moved. Finally, we'll also look at whether the suspect or our client had any reason to believe that they had permission to take that vehicle, whether they actually had permission or they reasonably believed that they had permission. Both constitute an affirmative defense to carjacking. Now, if you find yourself being investigated or charged with carjacking, there are some common sense measures you can take to protect yourself. First and foremost, don't talk. Don't talk to the police. Don't talk to the witnesses. Don't talk to your family. Don't post anything online, because anything you say when it's not to CBS Law can and will be used against you. Second, don't delete anything if you have communications showing that you had permission to take the vehicle, or you have evidence related that you were in a different place at the time of the crime. Don't destroy or delete anything. And then most importantly, call CBS Law so we can get started investigating the circumstances of your case, the evidence against you, and start building a defense to defend your reputation and keep you out of prison. So if you find yourself being charged with or investigated for carjacking, call CBS Law now at 213-800-8005, and together we'll get your life back.